Welcome to Stutter. I'm Chaya Goldstein, chef,
And I'm Mandy Rodstrom.
and we are here today to talk about a pretty buzzwordy topic, trauma-informed stuttering therapy. We're here to share also some of our stories and take up some space.
Taking doing it.
Mandy, I think it's probably best off for us to start by defining what trauma-informed stuttering therapy is. Do you want to take a stab at it?
Ah, I will. Thank you. What a great question to start this off. When I think of trauma-informed stuttering therapy, I think of person-centered, right at the center, person-centered care. I think of the exploration of seeking safety, discovering that, safety in one's body, relating to stuttering. I think of self-exploration, getting to know about stuttering, getting to check in with why does my body do that? And I also think of connection to self and community as another pillar of trauma-informed care. What do you think?
Hmm. Oh,
Yeah.
so juicy. I I'll build off of that to say that it's therapy that moves at the pace of safety and trust. And it's therapy that's intentional, not to re-traumatize a person who stutters, because stuttering can be traumatic. So, um, more there, but to stay on point, I would love to hear some of your story, Mandy. Um, would you start with your first memory of stuttering?
Yeah, I think I was around the age of 6 years old. A little girl, remember going to the hospital and like my mom took me and going back to with this guy in a white lab coat and my mom sitting in the lobby and leaving her and kind of not understanding why I'm there, but being told to put my hand in my pocket and squeeze it. And usually it was I had to squeeze it when I was struggling, stuttering, what I know now. Um, I remember, struggling saying my name at school. I don't know if those are early memories. Yeah, and I think a lot of my memories are around how people reacted around it, and it wasn't good. Yeah,
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
speaking of reactions, what was your family's response to stuttering?
Yeah. I think a really important part in my response to this is my dad um, was raised in a generation where he was pretty much didn't have any choice but to hide his stutter. And he would always say, I cured myself. I cured myself. I used to stutter. And so I think that sentiment was definitely pointed towards me that I needed to cure myself. I wasn't allowed to stutter. So he would get angry at me when I would stutter. And he told me to say it again and make it fluent or use your strategies. So definitely wasn't safe at home, unfortunately, but I really think that's just really connected to how my dad was never allowed to know his stutter either. So he did what he thought was best.
Mm.
Yeah.
Well, since we're talking on the topic of trauma, there is this concept that we talk about like transgenerational trauma, where you pass down some of your own trauma if you haven't worked through it. So it sounds like that was there.
Yes. Now I know that. Thanks to trauma informed, being trauma informed. Mm, yeah.
Gosh, that's real tough. That's real hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm, yeah. So you mentioned therapy and the hospital and the white coat.
Yeah.
What was the experience in the therapy room like?
I think I think that was the only memory I had of the hospital therapy, but I do remember school-based therapy, going to a really nice room off the library, with a really nice lady who had really fun games. Memory and Guess Who are my favorites. I think I look back. And early on, it was innocent. I feel like I get this word of innocent. I think it was just going along with being a little kid. But I think upper elementary, I mean, it was all fluency shaping. Like I couldn't stutter. I just was told how you talk is wrong. You need fix, right? Medical model vibe, fluency shaping. I just remember as I got older, definitely feeling just bothered by the fact that I just couldn't ever carry over what I did so perfectly in the speech therapy setting. And everyone would say, "Oh man, you're doing so great." Yeah, but when I go out in the classroom, I can't, it doesn't work. And so they would record me and I'd work harder. I hated being recorded. Never was asked. I just remember being like so uncomfortable. I just that constant simmering kind of feeling of uncomfortable in my body. I relate back to it so much now, and I can remember being back there right now. Um, just always leaving with, you're not doing enough. You're not doing enough, Mandy. There's something wrong with you. And I just would go out into the community and the world and do what I did best, which was like all the covert stuff. Now I know it was avoiding stuttering at all costs and just really still struggling with all the negative core beliefs, the self-stigma, and no one ever asked me what I felt about my communication. Um, but I just put it on myself. You got to do better. You just got to get through. Got to get through. Um, yeah,
It's a lot to carry.
yeah,
Yeah. You mentioned some things about your stuttering experience, like basically being an avoider. Were there other parts of the experience that you want to share of what it was like for you to be a person who stutters?
yeah. Um, I think one of the other things was like being the master avoider. But another, I think as I get older, looking back on my career is or even in college, I remember high school presentations and just being, or even reading out loud in class, like the mental gymnastics and the emotional overload of just panic. And I would count down the rows of the kids in front of me and look at my passage and, okay, here's the words. Let's try to practice, make sure that I'm fluent. I remember presenting in a class in high school and I was stuttering a lot and my teacher yelled at me and told me to stop and like stop recording. You can't do this right now. I mean, I remember that was a very, now I understand, traumatic moment, but ooh, there's another message, Mandy. This isn't okay. So just that feeling of never good enough. It's always waiting. You're gonna mess up. They're gonna think you're not enough, you're stupid. So a lot of that negative, again, I know I mentioned that, a lot of really rough self-critic, self-stigma, a lot of shame, a lot of guilt, a lot of avoiding of things I really love to do. I always wanted to perform in theater. I love music. It's my first language, I say. And I never tried out for theater. And it's in my blood, it's in my spirit, but I never did. So it loaded me with just a lot of shrinking, avoidance, um, insecurity, uh, not safe, not safe in my body. So just overcompensating, I think, too, so that I was just always a good friend to everyone. I do think part of the stuttering experience is a beautiful thing about it. There's so many now that I've learned, but an empathetic person I'm aware of. So I see that as a constant my whole life. Even though I wasn't safe in my body, I didn't like my stutter, but I always could appreciate knowing what it's like to be on the outside. So I was a good friend. I think I have to include that in my stuttering experience. But
Yeah, you mentioned some really those are some really hard times, like having that teacher say what she did to you. So that, you mentioned the self-stigma, but so much of it is a result of the experiences that are fed from the outside.
Right.
Um, yeah, goodness. Yeah.
Yeah, not a lot of adults that were there to say, Mandy, it's okay. You're okay. It's okay to stutter. Yeah, no, never had that.
Yeah.
Never had any adult checking in on me about that. Mm.
So not safe at home, not safe in school. So you got through school. It sounds like you started moving into college. Do you want to share some of your experiences of stuttering related to college and your choice in your career?
Yeah, so I went off to college to be a music teacher. As I mentioned, music's my first language, so I knew I'm going to be a music teacher. And then my coursework, because I was undecided in the School of Music at the time, but they had me take an intro to hearing, speech, and language. And I swear it was the first week, first few days my professor showed a video and the video was a little girl who stuttered and it just stopped me and I just had the biggest tears in my eyes and I just had this moment of holy cow, Mandy, you are meant to be a speech pathologist. And so the fate had it that way and I become a speech pathologist, which is so funny because I hated speech therapy. I had really nice speech therapists, I say. They were friendly, but I hated it. I hated speech therapy. But I went off and I thought, you know what? I look at it as a signpost. That first signpost that's stuttering, it was a gift in me and something I needed to bring and share with the world. And at that time, it was through being a therapist. And but during that journey in college, it was recommended I get speech therapy to brush up on my fluency. I got a speech easy. That was when it came out. It was all the rave. And so I got financial support. That was right before I graduated because I had this idea like, Mandy, you need to be fluent to be a successful speech therapist.
Were you required to brush up on your speech, basically go to therapy to cure stuttering in order to graduate? Like, or was it just a recommendation?
It was just a recommendation. I think it had to do with the whole like your communication, you're not very effective. You have this. I felt like it was more mm, personal in that sense. Not that I couldn't stutter or I had to be fluent to graduate and to see people, like work with people, but more of this persona or this idea of the ideal clinician.
Wow. So stuttering got you on the track to becoming a speech therapist. And then what kind of speech therapist did you become?
Fluency focused speech therapist at the beginning. And that's something I really have sat with over the years. And I mean, yeah, until I would say probably 10, 12 years in, I started getting more signposts. But I feel like before that, like kids who stuttered on my caseload, there was this instant connection, instant community. I would even say, I know I'm doing these strategies with you and they don't work, don't they? Like I would say that to them. And I felt like I could be honest, but I know that all I knew was what I was taught as a person who stuttered and doubled down as a trained, speech pathologist. But there were these little signposts along the way, the connection with the kids who stuttered. It was precious. It was this instant, I know what it's like. And we would talk about some of those struggles. But there were these moments like when the Oasis came across my desk, when Nina Reeves did her verbal diversity after COVID, that really started opening, okay, there's more than just fluency. So so grateful to those things that came along, and I was opening up space in my room for my students to explore that, to explore their identity, to explore their thoughts and feelings as it relates to stuttering, how to self-disclose. And but I remember being like, wait a minute, you're not okay with that yourself. Hmm. And so, a couple years go back or go on, and I think alongside of that was the fact that I worked in a district at a school that was trauma informed with Dr. Bruce Perry's work. And I just was so, I couldn't get enough of it. And so alongside of, the stuttering signposts, there was this beautiful holistic approach to working with all children that I just saw that changed me to everyday relationship first, helping children, noticing what it's like to not feel safe, noticing in their bodies, and being an adult who's going to be centered and grounded and, safe in their own body to help them, like this co-regulation and looking at knowing what dysregulation is and knowing what not being safe is. And so that I think again, stuttering signpost, but then here comes this trauma signpost. And um, I think I woke up, it was after COVID, if we go back again, COVID, when we had to go all online, I hated it. It caused panic in me. I would turn off my camera. I would be sweating and struggling and stressing before I spoke, after I spoke, I would cry. But it was just a lot of time now I remember of feeling this angst and suffering, mental, emotional anguish. And I had this moment of, you've been doing this job for 17 years. Why are you feeling like you're not enough and you're not worthy and you're not a good speech therapist? And I think that trauma signpost, the work I'd been doing with my students who stutter, that more stuttering affirming, the light bulb. Oh my gosh, Mandy, you have some trauma related to stuttering. And it was around the same time, I think John Hendrickson's New York Times article and video came out. It was like, oh my gosh, stuttering is okay. And it's about the lived experience. And then I went to this AIS SLP Grand Rounds webinar. And afterwards, I said, hey guys, do you have a trauma-informed stuttering therapist? And they smiled and they said, yeah, her name's Chaya. So full circle moment coming here with you. And it just, it, it was the best thing that could have ever happened to me. That's why I'm sitting here right now. Um, yeah, I got to explore my stutter for the first time. I got someone in my life said it's okay to stutter. The first person at 41 years old. It had been that long that someone told me that stuttering's okay. And just to be able to feel the feels, get in my body, kind of talk to those younger versions of myself, like let them put air to their stories, their voice, their hurt, their pain, their unseen. And then that was really helpful. But then and then there was a space to, okay, here's my stutter. Okay, I can touch it, I can do it. Ooh, that's a little scary. Okay, in time. And then that just opened up doors to then finally getting connected to the community. And it empowered me to go spread the word now. I'm on fire. I've presented trauma-informed stuttering practices in collaboration with Bridget Chapman and Anna Paula Mumi at the World Congress of Stuttering and the International Congress or International Conference on Stuttering. Presented at Friends to parents of children who stutter, SLPs, adults who stutter. Um, it's just the beginning. It's just something when you know how transformative and the power of healing, uh, there's so many in the community that I think can really benefit and then it would really resonate. So, yeah,
Mm.
ah, a lot.
Yeah. I think what's amazing that what stands out to me, and this is going back to you working with your students as an SLP, you always were following your intuition related to like what was feeling right and what wasn't feeling right. So like even though you were doing the fluency shaping, you're like, I'm not sure how great this is, but you were there and you were that safe person for them. And then you followed the signpost of the Oasis, which is the overall experience the assessment of the overall experience of stuttering, I believe. Forgive me if I mixed up those words. But what's beautiful is how you became aware that with that what you're offering to your students is something that you need to offer to yourself. And you combined the trauma informed with the stuttering and ta-da, came to this beautiful place of like giving yourself a gift, really.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, bring
now,
it home, that idea of, yeah, light's been on and finally got to see it. All the darkness had cleared out and it's so bright and on. Yeah.
yeah.
Beautiful.
And now you're giving the gift back, like all the great work that you're doing that you
Thank you.
mentioned. That's beautiful.
I'm in great company and I'm so excited to
Yeah.
hear your story, Haya.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where should we begin?
Yeah. What was your first memory of stuttering?
Interesting. It's such an explicit memory. I was in second grade, so it's a bit of a late onset. So it's questionable if I stuttered. I'm pretty sure I did stutter before then, but the memory was 6 or 7-ish years old, however old you are in second grade. And I never liked school lunch, so I wanted a peanut butter sandwich, which there was always fresh hot bread and peanut butter. I was like, why would I eat the school lunch if there's the fresh hot bread and peanut butter, which I loved? So I
Yeah.
remember going up to my teacher and trying to open up my mouth and ask for like peanut
Mhm.
butter, and I just blocked really strong. She was a kind woman. Like I have so much appreciation because she was just very patient with me. But I remember clocking like whatever this thing is, it's not good, and I'm never doing it again on a very like body level. So my first memory was there, and yeah, that's it.
Yeah. Wow. And I love how, like you said, it's that body, it's that instant, discomfort, right? And it tells you, oh wait, this isn't safe. This doesn't feel good. Yeah. Um, what was your family's response to stuttering?
Um, Pretty like sweet and accepting compared to some of the stories I hear how families are unaccepting or brutal. My parents were they heard me. I basically told my parents I can't speak. I didn't really have words for it, and I don't think they did either. So
Right.
they said, okay, we're gonna try to help you. And they took me um to a hospital where that was where the stuttering specialists were. So really decent response. Nothing negative there.
Oh, okay. So what was that? So what was your therapy? What kind of things did they do with you?
Fluency shaping all the way.
Mhm.
So putting the lines in the book so that I
Mm.
pause about every two words. Learning how to speak slowly, turtle talk, and all of the classic fluency shaping. And so I remember thinking this is a little frustrating. My profile was covert, so I avoided automatically from like the moment I ever stuttered. And I remember thinking like this is just sort of a waste of time. So I was diligent and I did everything the therapist said and I never stuttered. So I was dismissed from therapy. But little did anyone know I just learned how to hide my stutter so well.
There you go. You were an expert.
Yes.
Homework.
Yeah.
So, I know you said like your experience with it in therapy was a lot of the shaping. And I know you alluded to that feeling in your body. Can you tell us more about your experience with stuttering, like the actual
Yeah.
moments or how it
Yeah.
felt?
It's a really great question because I think stuttering, when you ask people like, well, what does stuttering mean to you or what's your experience, you get different answers from different people. And so my experience was confusion, ultimately. I was very confused. Why? Because every time I would block, the experience was shut down. This sense of dread. So first there was dread, anticipation dread, and then there was a disconnection. And I'd feel really disconnected from my body, like almost that out of body experience, like watching myself and seeing how long I would embarrass myself ultimately, because I was never going to show the stutter. So I just blocked real hard until I said the word. And so in that experience, aside from the visceral body response, there was also that emotional shame, and um, and then ultimately back to the avoidance. And this continued, I'd say, for, all of elementary. And so part of the stuttering experience by proxy was a whole bunch of avoidance strategies and tactics, like leaving the classroom, dropping your pencil, skipping days of class, etc. So that I don't disclose, well, I don't let it slip out that I stutter. Yeah.
Right. Did anyone ever tell you, you say disclose, did anyone ever teach you how to do that?
No, no, no. To my first therapist, who I don't know their name, to their credit, I remember one time I was told, let's listen to people talking on the radio because everyone says like something wrong. So like I guess there was like a little bit of acceptance somewhere at the
Mhm.
very start, but that was the beginning and end of it. So
Yeah,
um yeah,
I was just curious.
yeah. Yeah.
So then thank you for sharing all this. And my next question is like, when was the tipping point for you?
Yeah. It took a little bit of time for the tipping point because before that, it was many, many, many more layered experiences of pain and suffering. So that coincides with the pain and suffering of living with stuttering just day in, day out and trying to avoid showing it. And then, like, the pain, struggling, the frustration of the therapies that I received during that time. So I basically avoid, avoid, avoid. And then suddenly, like, a big event would happen at school, and it was so embarrassing. So I go back home and say, oh my gosh, like the stuttering thing is back. Can we get help? So we go to a therapist, but the therapist would go back to the strategies, and I'd be like, no way, I can't believe. And then we like go again. And so, say, I forget exactly, but second grade, I went to therapy, then maybe somewhere around sixth grade, ninth grade, 12th grade. And in 12th grade was the start of the tipping point because we had found a board certified fluency specialist. And like, what better therapist is there than a board certified specialist? But to my chagrin, the therapist had me use a timer and do ooh, ee, ah, and never mind, there was no explanation even of like, we're trying to, ease tension, like no conversation around stuttering. So stuttering continued to be the elephant in the room in therapy. And I remember having the thought at that point. So I'm like, how old are we in 12th grade? 17, 16, 17. I remember thinking like, this can't be it. There must be something more. I kind of want to know. And maybe I'll find out one day. Sort of like maybe I'll figure it out, but feeling very frustrated. And I also remember thinking this whole thing, like the experience of stuttering, is so big. How can it be that the highest trained individual is just focusing on the speech and just really frustrating? So, in some ways, that was a tipping point, but the later tipping point occurred about a year and a half, maybe 2 years later, because I went to study abroad and came back and was solidifying my major in college and was really thriving on the political science track, had professors rooting for me. I was very interested in politics and law and advocacy and was starting to take steps in that direction. And also, the stuttering was looming at large. And I remember thinking, everything that's leading me down this path is going to require me to talk and a lot of talking. But I'm going to be doomed because I stutter or I avoid showing stuttering. And therefore, it's just a terrible, terrible, terrible idea. So I felt really trapped because I couldn't proceed further. But then all of a sudden, that previously planted thought of like, I need to figure this out just came in real strong, where it was like, well, if you want to be able to advocate and do all these important things, why don't you like first discover what this thing is, and then you can decide if you still want to do this. I was like, I'm going to become a speech therapist and figure this thing out that all these therapists in the past clearly did not do a good job with me. And that was when that tipping point occurred. I switched majors and I went on this path to become a speech therapist to like solve this mystery. I really felt like stuttering was this mystery of stuttering. And from there on forward, there were many other steps along the way, which I'm happy to share if you want.
Oh my gosh, Haya, I love this again, this idea of you had this mystery. You were very aware of this mystery, which I think is a very common experience. And how you yes, you did you had this hopes and dreams of being an advocate and being in politics, but you're like, well, but wait, before I do that, I need to figure out this mystery, right? And so please tell us more. How did the path reveal itself to you? How did you uncover?
Yeah, it is a path revealing itself. And I love that. I do believe in life. Sometimes you take the next step and the path unfolds, the door opens. And it was like that because I signed up, um, went to the communication science disorders route, and then got accepted into a master's program in the Bronx. It was CUNY Lehman, and lucky for me, Dr. Ryan Pollard, was my professor for the fluency course. It was probably still is called fluency,
Mhm.
um, even though I know a lot of us would love for it to be called stuttering. And so Dr. Ryan Pollard was my professor, and I both loved the class and hated the class because while I was talking about being a person who stutter, I also was very much still covert, and it was really hard for me to hear stuttering all the time. And we had assignments like go out and voluntary stutter, and I actually tried to not skip, but kind of tell him I don't need to do this assignment because I stutter. I know what it's like. Why are you telling me to go stutter? So I actually had to redo the assignment because he wouldn't have it. He's like, no, no, there's a reason for you to go do this.
You
So I
got
tried to
avoiding
get out of
this.
that. And that really opened the door where like I forget the exact conversation, but I told him I was like, hey, I really care about stuttering, as you can tell. And I really want to like get involved and really understand it better because it's been a really big part of my life. So the next step of that path was he recommended to reach out to AIS because they had an intern program, which I applied to and got accepted, and I was enthralled. And as an intern, still covert, I began asking people who stutter to take really big risks
Mhm.
and show their stuttering and, like desensitize and really brave, bold actions. And I remember having one day just watching people who stutter, those people that I was with, really just put their necks out on the line and me thinking, what a hypocrite. Like, you haven't ever done this. Like, and you want to help people who stutter? Like, what are you gonna do about that? So I was like, I think I know what I have to do. And so I signed up for the following year to go back as a client. And I went through the program and it really was life changing. I learned a lot about myself, about stuttering, and most importantly, I connected with other people who stuttered as a person who stutters, not as the professional, which was really important for me to step into that role. And so that was a really big turning point. And following that, and then I graduated, started to work in the schools, and always really wanted to work more one-on-one with stuttering. And so the opportunity arose for me to work at AIS, and I so gladly accepted that, which was such an amazing opportunity. Um, and yeah, that was such an important, beautiful part of my stuttering journey as well.
Wow, Haya. Oh, it's so beautiful. And I just love this idea, the path revealed itself and, and then with your clients you were talking like you were learning, you were talking the talk. But I love this again, this analogy with the path. You had to walk the walk, right? And so how AIS came your way and to have a professor who stutters be an ally alongside you to say, hey, nope, you got to do this or wow, this, yeah, like to support you in that journey and to find a place that's gonna, you know, provide safe spaces. It certainly sounds like to get to know yourself, to get to know your stutter and then connect you with the community. It's this thread that just makes this perfect whole understanding and picture of a person, right? That's what we all need. So what are your best hopes now that you're trauma informed? What are your best hopes for people who
A
stutter?
lot of hopes. I think sharing some about how I came across the idea of being trauma informed would inform my best hopes.
Mm.
So I'll share a little bit about that. Remember I mentioned like this mystery of stuttering? Like it just felt like this black cloud of like a question mark black cloud. And I felt like there was this big unanswered question about what stuttering actually is. And I think each of us described like our body's response to stuttering. And so I wanted to understand that more, but I didn't really know where to look. So, as serendipity would have it, the path unfolded. My sister is a trauma therapist, and she has a ton of books, everything from Bessel van der Kolk to Pete Walker, basically a lot of the researchers in trauma. And so one day I'm sitting on the floor of her house and we're talking trauma and looking at books together, and I'm reading through, I believe it was The Body Remembers by Bessel van der Kolk, and he's talking about dissociation. And I like stopped dead in my tracks. I was like, wait, do you see what it says here? She's like, yeah, obviously that's what the body does when it shuts down when it's overwhelmed and experiences a trauma. I was like, that's what happens when I stutter. Do you understand? Like, this is the block. I was so excited. This is the block. And so things started to suddenly click. I was like, oh my goodness, I need to have trauma informed therapy. That's part of the path toward healing. And so I started learning just so much about that and started to implement that. So that was already at the point once I had graduated and I was already on the path to working with people who stutter. And so I started to plug in a lot of trauma informed therapeutic practices and now get to um, teach about them and talk about them.
Wow. And then, are there other projects that are on your horizon? I mean, going back to this politician advocate, I still see these parallels. I mean, you are such a pillar in our community, but I was curious, are there any other projects happening right
Yeah,
now?
there is a project. This is one near and dear to my heart. Um, I am researching with our colleague, Dr. Naomi Rogers and Chris and Anderson, who wrote the fantastic book, Every Waking Moment, about the experience of stuttering as complex trauma. So trauma, um, there's like big T, which is like a big traumatic event that has a beginning, middle, and end, but then there's little t, those are complex traumas. Those are relational in nature. So it's between human beings and they're recurring, they're nonstop. And so things back to the clicking, things clicked where I was like, wait, so stuttering for many people has this element of trauma in it. And we were curious to see, like, is this just maybe one person or is this part of a larger phenomenon? And so we are researching the experience of stuttering as complex trauma. We have some really great data. Um, I think it's okay to at least say verbally, yes, it is. And we'll share more and more data as it comes out. And so on the horizon is to continue that research and then to disseminate it and share it with the hopes, to your question on hopes, that more therapists can become trauma informed and support their clients as with more trauma informed practices.
Wow, Haya. Look at your advocacy, your act in action, a politician of sorts of getting the word out, standing up, giving people a voice, shedding light when there's darkness, being a beacon of light, I like to call it, Haya. And I just definitely thank you for that. Thank you for being a beacon of light for our community. And I'm really excited to talk more about this.
Me too. And thank you. I think here's a great place to put a pin in it because when we talk about trauma-informed practices, arts comes up like immediately. So I was thinking next time we can talk about trauma-informed stuttering therapy and avoidance reduction therapy for stuttering. What do you think?
I think it's perfect because I kept hearing this word the whole time, avoidance, avoidance, avoidance. Ah, yeah. How do we bridge? Yay. I can't wait. Part
All right,
two. Part
next
two.
time,
Part two.
part two. All right, we'll bridge the gap next time. This was so
Yes.
much fun, Mandy.
Thank
Thanks.
you, Haya. See you next time.